Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Town Hall webinar. Thank you for joining us, and please continue sharing your recommendations for programs at communications@architects.org. And we'll share this contact information again at the end of the program. I'm Eric White, Executive Director of the BSA. We all know that the world that we live in has been turned upside down by this virus. The situation facing us continues to change every day. But today, we want to share some ways that we are working to support you during these times. We're going to begin by sharing some updates on our work and then engage in a virtual conversation with you about how we can help and try to address some of the ideas and questions. Now, just as a small commercial, while we continue to do a lot of work on these programs, and we hope they're relevant to you, I'd like to mention this is an opportunity to sponsor such programs, as well as our knowledge communities. They are responsive to our times, serve the greater good of the AEC industry, and reach hundreds in each session. I also want to mention that the BSA is working to bring a variety of programs and services to you, and we can use financial support to keep these going. We realize that not everyone is in a position to help, but if you are, we hope you'll consider a donation, which can be done at architects.org/donations. Before we begin the program, I have just a few guidelines. For our question and answer period, we have selected a number of questions that were submitted ahead of time. Thank you for sharing these, and though we'll not be able to address all the questions, we do encourage you to continue to use the chat and Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen for additional thoughts. If the speakers are able to, we'll respond, and otherwise, we continue to keep these to inform future programming. During the meeting, we'll also be prompting you with a few poll questions. Responses are anonymous, and we'll be sharing those results live. And just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be posted in the next day or two on the COVID-19 resource page on architects.org. I also encourage you to continue to check our calendar for upcoming programs and knowledge community meetings. And I'd like to acknowledge that because this pandemic is a rapidly changing and dynamic phenomenon, we are all trying to figure this out together. Our conversation today is not intended to provide definitive answers, but is intended to provide support to you with some of the information that can help all of us move forward. And now, I'm excited to introduce to you those who are joining me for this town meeting. Natasha Espada AIA is the president and founder of Studio ENÉE and is the 2020 president of the BSA AIA Board of Directors. Ted Tolukian AIA is the president and founder of Tolukian & Tolukian and is the chair of the BSA Foundation Board of Trustees. Jay Wickersham, FAIA, is a partner with Noble Wickersham & Hart, a design, construction, and environmental law firm, and was the 2018 BSA president. And Susan Green is our committee engagement and technology manager at the BSA. To begin today, let me turn it over to Susan to kick us off and share some of the information on our committees.
Thank you, Eric. Our knowledge communities have always been a vital part of what the BSA is. We have over 40 of them. They run the gamut from specific topics, specific groups having to do with the architecture, engineering industry, also administrative groups, user groups, technical user groups, and for anybody who's been in BSA space and at the meeting, you understand what the network is. The chain was kind of broken for a very short period of time when on March 13th, we were all hit with this COVID-19 lockdown, but they came back better and stronger than ever. I can't say enough about what the chairs have done. They ranged from workshops online, they're all virtual, about re-entering the workplace post-COVID. Our Global Practice Network did a program on design meets diseases across geographies, which was a fabulous blend of design tips and information from around the world. Accounting firms who discuss the CARES Act, not just the application, but in maintaining and the bookkeeping needed to qualify for a grant versus a loan. Our healthcare facilities held a charrette with Build Health International discussing the treatment centers for low resource settings. Make Tank, one of our more unusual, actually, group of makers have begun and put forth an effort to coordinate makers of PPE. And they now have a link that's a link on our website and on their website where everything is being mapped. So whatever you're able to contribute, you can go to the map, you can find out where somebody local is that may need your help and so forth. Our Small Practices Committee has been holding twice monthly meetings, and this is a wonderful place for people to network, to talk about what challenges they're up against, and to come up with solutions together. Then we have we still have our learning committees, our learning sessions where there's HSW credits being offered, some on building envelope. Committee on the Environment has one coming up on the 2030 commitment. So they're doing it all, and they're doing it in stellar fashion. I encourage everybody to take a look at the calendar and please join. They are all open to everybody. You do not have to be a member, and right now they're all virtual. On Tuesday, our Urban Design Committee is hosting Who Designs the City? Strategies for Inclusionary Planning and Design, all about equity and diversity in our industry. They have a couple of panelists who are going to be doing case studies. So if you can join us, that would be great. And again, they're open to everybody, so please join us. And from here, I'm going to pass the torch over to Natasha.
Thanks, Susan. So I am currently involved with 4 BSA task forces that we created in the past month. This includes the Guides for Practice, Policy, and Advocacy, the Future of Design and Planning, and continuing my work with equity, diversity, and inclusion. The first one, the Task Force for Guides for Practice, we put together one single resource of shared information for architects and architecture firms dealing with COVID-19, and we did this in March, at the end of March. And then we revised this document in mid-April with additional information on construction and HR resources. So you can find it on the BSA website. The second task force, which is the Policy and Advocacy, we're working with AIA Massachusetts on city and state level policies regarding shutdowns, construction, projects moving forward. All of this information is evolving and will continue to change. Right now, the biggest piece that we're working with is trying to figure out when permitting and community meetings with the City of Boston are occurring. We find that some of the municipalities have already moved this forward. City of Boston is still working on it. Please check on our website for the latest information, and we will continue working closely with AIA Massachusetts on this. And then we also have a group of partners in our industry. So we've led several meetings with our association industry partners such as AGC, ULI, NAOP, ASLA, and others. And we're identifying opportunities for sharing information and joining forces regarding state and city policy. Then we've created a task force, that Future of Design and Planning, which we created 2 separate buckets on. The Future of Design and Planning, and then the Future of Practice. So for the Future of Design and Planning, in the next few weeks, we're planning to host a weekly online forum to connect the membership on topics related to the future of design, or how design can transform the built environment post-COVID-19. So every week will be a different topic. We're exploring a platform, so stay tuned on this. We also had a conversation with the college representatives, and we have another one next week. They're the college reps on the board about how to engage students. We want to make sure that we keep students engaged and that they can get college credits, hopefully, and that we keep them in the profession. So we have come up with some ideas, and we're in the process of planning a design competition for students. And another idea is to provide a 1-week externship, unpaid externship for students related to research and partner them up with firms. Another initiative is we're looking for ways to train students in new software and provide technical courses in sustainability, LEAD, and the ARE exam courses to help them with new skills. And we'll also be doing a Dean's Roundtable. Regarding the future of practice, for recent grads and interns under 10 years in the profession, we're putting together virtual coffees for 3 to 4 recent grads or interns and 1 or 2 mentors. I think we were calling it Coffee with an Architect. We also have the Emerging Professionals Network is also doing a mentoring program, and they're looking for mentors, and also looking for opportunities to create a mid-career mentoring program, as Women in Design has a very successful one. And then for firm principals, there's a work sharing program. There was a kickoff this morning. You should be receiving emails from Eric White. If not, please let him know if you're a principal of a firm. And then we're going to continue our work with equity, diversity, and inclusion. In January, we created 2 new knowledge communities, the equity, diversity, inclusion, and then the LGBTQ. The LGBTQ community hosted a social hour, and we'll have upcoming events. And the EDI, we're going to continue the work from the task force, the original task force. We're working with DCAM, the BSA, and other industry leaders on the DCAM Affirmative Marketing Program, as the state's new goals for WBE and MBE is increasing to 21.7% on July 1st. And in June, we're going to begin the programming on the guides for equitable practice again, so stay tuned on those. So that's what's going on with BSA AIA, and now I would like to turn it over to Ted Talukian to talk about the BSA Foundation.
Thank you, Natasha, very much. Each of you summed up so well the great team of people working together to support our membership and our extended design community. It really is a reflection of the passion that we all share to collaborate and improve our conditions in this extraordinary time. As each of my panelists noted, the BSA is a community committed to improving the quality of life through the power of design, and this has never been more true for us now as we collaborate to develop better resources for our membership and the general public that will better equip us to navigate the uncertainties thrust upon us by COVID-19. In our last town hall meeting at the beginning of April, I was able to provide an update on how the foundation is evaluating and thinking about new ways of providing design education and design resources for our youth and family programs and in our communities. Susan and Natasha provide a great overview of the work that we are doing for our membership and in our environment. And this morning, I would like to provide a brief outline of some of the work that we're doing for our youth and family and community design programs since the beginning of April. At the core of our family design education programs, we've been promoting the public understanding and appreciation of architecture and design for K through 12 students and teachers and families. And we've served over 4,000 kids in the last few years alone. And as you can imagine, this has been relatively hands-on. Certainly now this type of interaction or in-person collaboration just can't occur. And with the continued closing of schools and the extended remote work environments for parents, the needs for youth and family design education support has been evolving. We hear a lot of parents saying to us they're getting taxed with too many worksheets or too many Netflix videos, or maybe that's my kids alone. I would like to say, you know, the magic of Kids Build that we had for so many years, the light bulb moment and the adrenaline of those creative problem solving in remote environments is more needed. So recently, our foundation design director, Polly Carpenter, has been able to work with the City of Boston, City of Cambridge, and Medford to provide an online teaching packet or kit of activities for kindergarten students. Its primary focus is a prompt questions to the students by each mayor. And that question is, what ideas do these kids have to make Boston a more fair and interesting place? Wow, right? So we've given this to the students, and we're in the midst of receiving back feedback. And what this packet includes are online resources that are developed over a multi-day program to help kids initially brainstorm ideas, draw them, and build them with common materials that they have in their home, with the opportunity to share their vision in an online virtual gallery that the BSA is developing in the coming weeks. This is really going to be very exciting, and I believe we all know that we have a lot to gain from the insight from kids today. So stay tuned as that pops up on our website. Additionally, our community design director, Ben Peterson, has been working closely with a great group of design professionals and community stakeholders to develop a database and inventory of buildings, facilities, or infrastructures that can be adapted to become alternative care sites in response to the increased COVID-19 demands on area hospitals. In collaboration with over 40 people, from principals and firms to first-year emerging professionals, and also support from allied software companies such as Autodesk, the BSA in turn assembled 3 working groups. And these working groups worked diligently over the past month to identify the spatial and infrastructure needs for alternative care sites, to 2, evaluate the real estate inventory that could be paired with these needs, and then to build a virtual platform that could organize this information as an online resources. As this information came together from the 3 working groups, just this past week, through the hard work of many people and volunteers, the BSA has been able to upload a database on our website with buildings, sites, and properties that can be considered for alternative occupancy. We are also able to open a portal on the website where people can suggest a building or facility so that we can continue to grow the available options. And then thirdly, we're able to develop a dashboard. And this is really a great opportunity where we're able to share these tools and what we've been able to put together with other cities and communities so they too can build a similar resource. So in general, I think we're learning that we can build a process that we can be more proactive and more responsive, not only to today's needs, but for the future of such pending needs with affordable housing, climate change, and the demand that carbon has in our environment. And I would like to say that overall, the BSA really is thankful to the many participants, architects, allied professionals, and community participants for their persistent leadership in the creation of safe, healthy, and sustainable, vibrant communities. Without all of us collaborating together, we certainly can't overcome the challenge in front of us. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jay for his additional perspective.
Thanks a lot, Ted, and thanks to everyone for all of these updates. I'm just going to hit upon 2 issues here on the screen, plus a third that's recently come up. Among the blizzard of laws and orders that are coming out of government at all levels, and that can be very hard to keep track of. But let's kind of start with construction. As I imagine everyone is aware, Governor Baker has continued the shutdown of workplaces statewide now through May 18th, and that applies to all construction sites other than for housing projects. And then, I'm sure people are aware, within Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, a few other communities, even more restrictive rules are in place that have effectively shut down all construction sites. However, what people should start to be aware of, BSA members, is that as we're starting to look forward towards the reopening of construction, a number of different guidelines have started to be issued that are going to be governing job site safety. And although this is going to be the contractor's responsibility for on-site safety, as it currently is, there are possibilities that there's going to be a need for architects to be aware of it. So we'll come back to this in the questions, I'm sure, but I do want to flag that you can find a link on the BSA's website to draft guidelines that have been put out by the City of Boston. And those are expected to take effect when construction does restart. And among other things, they are going to be requiring the contractor to certify that the contractor has complied with these job site safety guidelines. A second issue I want to touch upon, which Natasha has already discussed, is this question of local permitting, which architects almost invariably are involved in on our projects. The legislature has passed a law which allows cities and towns to pause local permitting procedures during the emergency and for up to 45 days afterwards. However, as Natasha has already noted, This doesn't mean that cities and towns must stop. In fact, it's really up to their choice. And so what we really have is a patchwork where some communities, including Boston, have essentially stopped all public hearings, but other communities are proceeding using a variety of virtual ways of holding these hearings. So very important to check in with the best available information from whatever community your project is located in to find out, has that community actually stopped permitting procedures, or is permitting continuing, or will it perhaps restart at some point in the near future? And then the third point I just want to touch upon is that the legislature has passed a law that now allows notaries to notarize documents electronically, a so-called e-notarization bill. And there's information about this on the BSA's COVID website. This can affect a variety of legal documents, including, once construction restarts, construction mechanics lien waivers, which typically have to be notarized. Now, I've been told that that this law is rather cumbersome, and so it may still be easiest to go into your local bank or wherever you've been used to getting documents notarized, but it is a new option that people should be aware of. So with that quick summary, and again, we can come back to some of these in the question period, I'm going to turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Susan and Ted and Natasha for that. And I just want to take a moment to really assure everyone that we remain committed to the design and building industry, and I hope you heard that through the comments that are here. But just as importantly, we're really committed to the communities where we all live. And I think design is going to be an important part of how we come out of this COVID challenge. And I think working together is going to be a real key piece to being able to address what this new world is going to look like. So we're committed to providing you with the latest information and also some of the best programming to help prepare you for that future. And you can find a lot of that on our website, architects.org/resources. We also have a series of high quality programs that will be coming up addressing topics, everything from embodied carbon, technology, professional business, equity, diversity, inclusion, and much more. And I also want to share that, you know, we in this region are not alone. That we've been talking with a lot of our fellow members across the country and throughout this region. And, you know, I think what you hear, particularly among the cities across the country, they're facing many of the same challenges that we are. That there's an economic shutdown, that there are health concerns, and we're trying to work and find what are some of the best practices that are happening around the country that we can share with you on that. And so along those lines, I think now might be a good time to transition into some of the questions that folks have shared. And I have to say that it was impressive, the diversity of questions, and many of them tended to come across in several different categories. And so I want to start and maybe bounce back to Jay, because you were talking a little bit about this, and recommendations for, you know, how we keep staff safe on construction sites as the idea starts to return. And I will say that you know, we're hearing from both the state and local that construction will be one of those industries that's likely to start up first. We don't have an exact date, but I do anticipate that it is going to be among the first industries that will be starting up. And with that, obviously, we want to make sure that people are safe as they're getting back there. Maybe start with Jay, but then open it up to others. Any additional recommendations on safety and construction sites?
Sure, Eric. Thanks for you know, kind of raising this point, which, as you said, I've heard a lot of questions about relating to this and just in general. So, you know, first point, you know, job site safety is the responsibility of the contractor, and so anytime an architect goes on site, you should be familiar with the new rules that the contractors put in place and make sure you are abiding by them. And those rules, there are statewide rules that were already issued by the Baker administration when they first did the statewide shutdown, which was actually phased in. Construction was not initially as fully affected as it is now. And there are now City of Boston draft guidelines. You know, I would expect that we will see more of these. They will probably be more fully fleshed out. And so that's going to be, I think, an important responsibility for all of us in the profession, is to keep up to date on these evolving guidelines. You know, within that framework, you know, if you're concerned, your responsibility though as an employer is to the safety of your own employees. And so if people are concerned that a construction site is not following safe guidelines, you know, that's something, you know, to take very seriously. And I've also heard, and I'll maybe turn this to Natasha and Ted, because I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion about this, various ways that job site visits may be affected. You know, I've heard about people making arrangements to visit sites later in the day when there are fewer people on site, and various possibilities for virtual review. So let me maybe, and again, all of this is going to be a fast evolving area where we're all figuring out the new rules, but let me maybe turn this to Natasha and Ted to see if there's more that you guys can you know, offer about what you've been hearing.
I can also speak about municipalities in general. I found that most of the municipalities are moving forward with construction projects. And one thing that I do want to admit, I mean, not admit, but discuss, and I want to make sure that Jay agrees with this, is that we're not, as architects, we're not responsible for telling the owners to proceed with construction or in charge of any construction protocols on the site. This is the responsibility of the contractor. And for liability issues, we want to make sure that we do our job to the point that we can and do it well, but we also don't want to be in charge of the site, and we don't want to be in charge of making decisions about the site. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes, no, Natasha, you stated that very, very clearly and accurately. Our professional liability insurance expressly excludes anything having to do with job site safety, and all contracts make that the sole responsibility of the contractor. So we abide by their rules. We don't tell them or the owner what should be done, or if a job should start or not.
And the owners should also be kind of prudent about that and use their legal counsel for any decision making for that. Yes, we've heard the same thing you have, which is to try to go, if you have to go to a site, go later on in the site. We're having issues with approval of materials. Sometimes it's very difficult to do when you're not on a site, and also for site visits. And I know that we've been getting some videos of site visits, but there's also liability related to that, because if they don't look in the area where there is something that is not approved by the contract, then in essence you're approving it. So I think it's I think the construction piece is a little trickier for architects, but I think, again, if you're going to the site, go when there are the least amount of people. Make sure that they have everything in place with signing all the agreements to make sure that the sites are clean and that there is protocol.
Those are great points between Jay and Natasha, and I just want to just reiterate those and just actually add a couple other pieces that, you know, when going to a job site, realize that we all share the same concern: architects, contractors, owners. And I believe that, you know, people are really trying to be responsible to manage this. So knowing that certainly is very important, or recognizing that. Additionally, as architects and firm leaders, and also as employees, is that prior to going to a job site, I would really urge firms to train their staff by preparing them with the information. And Jay brought up the AGC guidelines, making sure that it's circulating amongst your staff in advance before people go to the job site. And additionally, which is probably the best thing we can do aside from those two, is just to lead by example, right? It's amazing what happens when you follow the rules and you maintain them and you show to people that you're doing that. It helps us work collectively. And so I'm just encouraging everyone to, you know, be the professionals that we are, and be an example. So.
Yeah, and I think those are excellent points. And I'm curious, one of the questions that came up that's related to this too is, do you see any challenges with how these safety precautions would impact construction schedules? Any thoughts that you have on any of that? And I open that up to all of you on that question.
It's an interesting actually point of view, because in some ways I've noticed that the rigor is on one hand, providing a lot of focus, and that in turn has a reflection on efficiency. So when people are sort of realizing that there's extra attention here, that the concentrated efforts are helping things move in a way that maybe didn't before. On the other hand, they take up additional time, and so there may be some required patience occurring between not just architects and professionals and contractors, patience for information, patience for how you view things, patience with distance. And so I think that there's two sides of this that are sort of working with each other. And I think a part of that is evolving. And I think as a group of people who are involved in construction, is that as we continue to learn how to do this, we're just going to gain momentum and become ultimately more efficient.
I think to add to what Ted is saying is that there are opportunities here. You have to transform the way that you do CA, at least temporarily. And so if you don't do it, you're going to cause delays on projects. But at the same time, you have to be mindful that that there is no liability on your part of doing something in a different way. So I think it's trying to come up with creative ideas and creative ways to keep it moving, to not stop projects. We don't want to have a time here for several months of lag of construction or permitting or anything, because it will impact our profession. So how can we become part of the solution to these, to moving this forward in the most responsible way possible?
And this is Jay, and one more thing I will add to those are some great comments. And one of the things, for example, I've heard, and I'm sure Natasha and Ted would agree, is that even if a project has stopped construction, it doesn't mean that the architect's work on CA necessarily has stopped. There are still shop drawings to review, RFIs to respond to, potential change orders to review. So I'm hearing from architects that in many ways they're almost as busy as ever. But that does raise a question, and going back, Eric, to where you started, if construction is going to be more stretched out, or if we will be seeing stop and start of construction in the future as there may be new waves of infection, that's going to be putting uncertainties, time extensions, and cost pressures on architects. And so you're going to want to keep track of your contracts and not be shy about telling owners in times when it's costing you more to provide those CA services, and that you'll need to be kind of fairly compensated for that.
And I think that's a really great point. And I think on this topic, I would also say we probably still don't know. I have to say I've been hearing from several people that many construction projects have actually increased and sped up, because right now their school projects, for instance, that are still continuing are the engineers and the contractors are reporting that they're able to get on there and be able to do the work much faster because they don't have to compete with all the people. You certainly hear that with transportation projects and such. And whether that will go across the board is really unclear at this point. And Jay, you raise a really good point that this might be something that we'll be dealing with throughout the year, which goes to an interesting next question. And there was a lot of questions on this one, and this is certainly the hot topic that everyone wants to know about. And I'm not sure that there are specific answers, but thoughts that you have about where the business of design and construction is going to be as we start to think about coming back to work. Do you see, what are you thinking and seeing, and how are you thinking about responding to the economy and the financial challenges that are out there?
Oh, I mean, this is a very interesting topic. And it's one that the profession could really see as an opportunity, right? We have to plan for change. And when you plan for change, you have to plan for new opportunity. And one of the strengths that I think our profession has is that we add value where other, let's say, disciplines may not be able to. So it kind of goes without saying that there is a new opportunity ahead of us. And if we're talking about businesses are going to change. In order to be successful, we're going to need to make sure that we adapt.
I agree. I think this is a time where we're problem solvers, we're creative thinkers. This is a time where we have to create new opportunities for ourselves, and everything has to kind of, we have to look at it in a different way and help our clients and our colleagues, help others. I was just on an AIA, Northern California AIA, which is called the Redland Empire AIA. We had a talk about all this. I was trying to figure out what was happening in California. Very similar. They're opening sooner than we are. But one of the things that the marketing director of one of the big firms there was saying was that we need to figure out how to help and how to be leaders in this. But we have to transform. And so right now this is unprecedented. We don't know where the economy is going. We know it's not increasing anytime soon. And if you read architectural record and see all what the AIA is putting out, it's a little daunting. But I just think keeping communication with your clients, continuing to find different ways of opportunities to be relevant, doing so pro bono work to keep you busy and also out there and connecting with others is the best way to do. But I think there are going to be huge impacts to the construction industry and to the architectural industry and all of our peers, but it's all in how we deal with it. And it's all in how you create opportunities for yourself.
And this is Jay, and I think these are some great thoughts. I have a couple of further suggestions. The first comes from past experience with recessions. The way the construction industry comes back after recessions is in renovations and retrofits, not new buildings. So I will expect that clients are going to be very slow and cautious in the major investments on new building projects, but the existing building stock and being kind of able to rethink how to do renovations, I would expect that's where the biggest opportunities will be. And then I would go kind of further, which I think is unlike past experiences, and that's to really think about temporary adaptations of spaces and buildings. We're in a new area that until there is either a vaccine or herd immunity, every workplace, every living space, every public space will have to be rethought. And architects, I think, can play a very important role in thinking through the spatial implications of that. What are the spatial cues to let people know if they're moving from a high risk to a low risk space or vice versa? How do you have spatial cues about keeping social distancing? And so I think, thinking about using our design training, but in a way that's much more focused on temporary adaptations, which may prove to be more permanent than we expect, of existing spaces and buildings is where I expect, there's going to be a huge need for our kinds of expertise.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, and I like the questions on this. Jay, you're bringing up a good point about temporary adaptation and where will that lead us in the future. And really what we're experiencing is a cultural shift in uses and how they will be seen. I'll give you an example. I had recently a development project that was a mixed use project. It was maybe more conventionally focused. The developers come back and sort of really trying to drill down on how can we pair the needs of what people have today with the way this development could become. So right then and there, it's again back to collaboration. It's back to adding value and thinking about ways that we can creatively think about what is culturally happening in our environment now. And as architects, we can help our clients reimagine future uses and what they are in the short term. And, you know, even as Jay pointed out, how they could adapt for long term. So it's a very fascinating problem that will really mean that architects have to think beyond the status quo and what conventions are and really force us all to adapt.
The other piece that Jay mentioned also that was interesting, which is true from my talks with DCAM, is that their work is the fact that repairs, there really won't be very many new projects in the near future, but that there will still be ongoing repairs, ongoing construction, and ongoing infrastructure work, because this is the first time when we don't have cars on the roads at the same level or even close to the same level as we usually do. This gives an opportunity for infrastructure projects that may have been delayed due to phasing. So there are opportunities. They will not be traditional opportunities.
No, I think that's great. This is Jay. And so again, spinning off on what Natasha and Ted, what you both said, suggest a couple of further thoughts. You know, one is, as designers, designing for flexibility and uncertainty. I mean, here's an example. Every hospital in the country will now have to be redesigned to provide surge capacity for ICUs for future pandemics. I mean, that's just going to be a given. We've never designed any hospitals for that, and that will be a new baseline kind of flexibility standard for healthcare. You know, that's, I think, just one of what will become, you know, untold examples of flexibility that we'll need to learn, and I think can help our clients learn. And so I think one further thought too, and this goes, I think, Natasha, what you just sort of said about DCAM is we should move away from our focus on projects. And we should be thinking of ourselves as ongoing counselors to our clients in the way that, like, the old-fashioned family doctor was an ongoing counselor. You know, ongoing relationships, ongoing help and advice on all of the kind of these kinds of adjustments, questions, the way, Ted, you talked about rethinking projects. Natasha, you talked about, you know, how to really pay attention to repairing and refurbishing what we've got. You know, that I believe is, you know, can and should be really the future of practice that offers great opportunities to put our skills at the service of society.
Well, we're kind of all touching on different opportunities. You know, the family doctor is Jay's really good kind of point of view. It's like, well, you know, consultant, you know, just a case of how you chew on ideas with your clients about new ways of thinking. But really what this is leading to, I don't think there's one answer. I don't believe we're going to be at, like, it's just adaptive reuse. It's going to no new construction. It's going to mean diversity, right? Being nimble, being able to provide a wider net of services to your clients and really being able to plug in. But ultimately is, let's use our creative skill set to go back to the method of just adding value and helping them answer their own questions. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that I love thinking about right now as I hear other people talk about work-home relationships is, you know, how is this going to change housing, right? How's commercial office space going to change? I was speaking with a client whose partner is a fairly sort of high up the chain on a very large multinational company, and they were talking about cycling their employees through their office spaces and potentially looking at downsizing their office space such that they brought in a third of their workforce periodically. That pointed to an interesting idea about, you know, what are people going to do at home? Are they going to sit at their kitchen table and design and work from their laptop? Or do we need to really think about, you know, the home office concept and what that is, not just from I'm going to take Friday and work from home, but what am I going to do sort of for a more extended duration? Great opportunity here. I hear developers already thinking about this. Architects already thinking about this. So there's a great sector about how to reimagine the way we live and the way we work.
And that's actually a great point into some of the questions that also had to deal with addressing the workspace, as many firms are starting to talk about their plans for coming back, and how realistic is it to think about design that is going to keep people 6 feet apart, or you know, is going to be able to be productive in bringing people together. And what are you thinking about there? All three of you have offices, and you know, I know, Susan, you're part of our group at the BSA that's looking at how to rethink how we're going to be reopening. What are you thinking about that?
The question is how do you think how we're going to reopen our offices in general?
Yeah, you know, what do you see as some of the challenges that as you're starting to think about your offices coming back?
I think the biggest piece is kind of the physical aspect of it, right? And keeping that safe. Especially, I have a small office. And so I had heard about, you know, coming in one door, going out one door, but we only have one door. So, I mean, so I think it's kind of taking some of the industry suggestions and modifying them. Right before we went up to March 16th, we were working in the office. So until the day that the governor said that we shouldn't, because we're a small office, but also we have enough space where people could be in separate rooms. And so we felt like we were already doing it. So I think it'll be an easier transition for us. I just think it's in the collaborative spaces. So when you're having a meeting around a conference table, we were kind of just trying to stay as far away from each other. When you're working in a workroom or things that are shared, how do you keep them safe and clean? And so in our case, it's a little different. I think when you have a firm of hundreds of people, there has to be a checklist, because otherwise it's harder to control. I think the smaller firms probably have an easier time of controlling it in some ways. So I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that there's two parts to this problem. One is getting everybody back to work now, you know, in the near future or as soon as possible, and the adaptations that we have to make and the accommodations and the things that we have to think about. It's physical, but it's also which people need to be in proximity, teams, personalities, all of those things. But I think that when we're redesigning our workspaces, even if it's, I mean, right now we're doing it kind of on the fly, adjusting what we can adjust in the constraints that we're working with now. But I think that we ultimately need to think about the long term. I always think about, you know, after 9/11, we had to take our shoes off going to the airport. This was after the person was caught with a bomb in his shoe, right? So we adjust to that given situation, and everything followed suit. But that's not the only variable. And I think that we need to, as this keeps coming up, plan for change, and possibly plan for changes that we aren't even aware are coming down the pike. I really think we need to have a broad view of what the future of our office can look like. And just like we in our practice need to be nimble, I think in our planning we need to be nimble as well.
This is another great topic, and I think it points to something that is happening, that it's still evolving. We're all trying to understand, you know, what the workplace is going to look like when we occupy it. And what we would probably benefit from, as the AGC has put together, let's say, construction site standards, we need standards that we can say are the baseline for how offices need to operate. And you could already see them starting to formulate. And I think as the weeks continue, I would like to ask Eric, are we aware of how the state is looking at this? Will they be issuing workplace guidelines? And then ultimately, as those guidelines are in place, it becomes really a trickle-down effect where each office has to take the responsibility, and then every individual has to take the responsibility to sort of follow those or even implement good practice. In the end, it really, in any kind of work environment, it's about, you know, mutual respect for coworkers, and it's about patience, and it's really understanding each of his needs, because ultimately everybody's going to share the same concerns, and it's going to help us, you know, understand how to move forward when we do that.
And then this is Jay, and I think
Go ahead, Jay.
so yeah, great thoughts. And I think there is a particular role that the architectural community and the BSA in particular and all of its members can play, and that's in actually turning those guidelines into spatial graphic materials, so that people can you know, a diagram, you know, is going to be could be worth 5 pages of dense text, and nobody else can do that as well as we can. And so I would foresee that there could be a really important role for the BSA and other architectural organizations. I'm sure this is going to be happening nationwide. And Eric, you know, you can, I'm sure you'll help us team up with other AIA chapters on how to kind of get this information, these materials, looking at different case studies of different kinds of office layouts, not just for architects, but for businesses of all kinds, because there are going to be a lot of small businesses who aren't architects that will be in real need of this kind of information. So I think there's a very important role that we can play on how to create safe and healthy workplaces.
And there's some really great materials that are out already. And if you, again, not to keep directing everyone back to our website, but there's some materials there. And the CDC has also come out with some specific guidelines on looking at how to reopen offices safely.
Eric, can I add something really quickly to that?
Yep.
Is that, and this could be one of the questions in the chat about soliciting white paper ideas about pandemic design standards. So when we were doing the guides for best practices, one of the chapters was going to be about best practices for moving forward in design. And then we realized that we really needed to put out the best practice guides. And so we did it separately. So now we were talking about white paper ideas or just kind of brainstorming as a task force. And that's how we came up with this forum that we're going to be implementing in the next 2 weeks or something to that effect, about getting ideas out there and discussions out there about these same topics. And we don't know how that's going to continue to evolve, but it's in the works right now.
And I'll encourage architects to think about other forums other than white papers, so that we don't have to read everything. We can see some of it visually as well. So, you know, I want to take a page out of your Natasha, your playbook that you are often saying to us. Do we have to talk about COVID all the time? And I think
COVID fatigue. Yeah.
I think Shireen asked a really great question. You know, do we foresee opportunities to lead clients in changing course to seriously address carbon in design and construction? Is this an opportunity that's out there? And let me throw that to all, well, especially Natasha, Ted, and Jay.
So go ahead, Natasha, please.
So we've been, it's just really quickly, and before all of this happened, there was a task force that was created at the BSA on sustainability and climate change, and there also to talk about carbon with the the Green Ribbon Commission. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes.
And so there are all these opportunities where we're working together with the Green Ribbon Commission on these specific things. And every time, you know, every Friday, by the time we've had meetings all week long on COVID-19, I say, let's remember what we do best, and let's make sure that we don't forget there's issues on affordable housing, on climate change, on all these different pieces that we really don't want it to fall through the cracks. So, Ted.
Oh, it's great. It's what I think we're all finding is that when the COVID pandemic was put upon us, I think we can all admit we were very reactive. Like, oh, new situation, new condition for us to react to, and people built a process, and that process has been put into motion, and you can see the work that's being done and the collective team effort. If we learn from this experience and look at sea level rise affordable housing, carbon. It's more of a need to be proactive and to use these experiences that we've had to look at a crisis that we're going through and make a parallel sort of set of processes that can prepare for the next set of challenges. So I think there's a lot of learning to be done from this pandemic and how we've, let's say, the affordable care, the care sites, the alternative care sites, for hospitals. Look what the work was done by the professionals. Let's take that energy, let's take that spirit and build a process now for carbon. Let's look at let's look at these red line buildings that are around the city and say, hey, how can we help them? Let's look at affordable housing and let's look at sea level rise and really look at our neighborhoods and put plans and a process together with action.
And I'll just share that, I think this goes back to the point that Jay was making earlier, is that one of the first things that's going to come back are the aspects of retrofitting and renovation. And, I think a lot of the communities have set up guidelines to really achieving net zero energy goals, and that the majority of the impact there is going to have to come through retrofit and renovations. And so I think this is an opportunity to have those conversations and to move things forward. We've got just a couple minutes, so I wanted to ask, or give each of you about 20 seconds to share. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the community as we close out this town meeting? And let me start with President Espada there. 20 seconds.
I just think that in general, the BSA, working with the BSA on all of this, you've done an amazing job, Eric, you and your team. I think in general, I love the fact that the knowledge communities are starting up again. The fact that we have a lot of attendance and a lot of input from the membership has been one of the best things that if anything, has happened from this COVID-19. So I think continuing to be involved with the BSA, sharing your design leadership, and helping us get through these tough times will only strengthen our profession, and hopefully will let, and work sharing and keeping us together will only let us continue to survive through these tough times.
Susan.
To kind of tailgate on what Natasha said about the knowledge communities, I just want to encourage everybody to check out what we have going on. If you haven't already, join us. Share your thoughts. If there's a topic that you would like to see addressed that isn't being addressed, please feel free to email me directly. If there's a community that is missing, let me know that too. Maybe you are our next knowledge community leader. Thank you.
Jay.
I guess if I have one thing, it's it's so moving how, in any circumstance, even, the most hard fought business negotiation, we're checking in with each other and kind of wishing genuinely for each other to stay safe and healthy. And if we can kind of maintain that awareness of looking out for each other as we go forward, that would be my deepest wish.
And Ted.
I'm going to take a slightly different topic. Happy Friday. Last night I left my office fairly late because of a pending deadline coming up after this town hall. And I took a walk because I've been in my office. And I walked through Post Office Square and I saw the tulips blossoming. And I thought, this is awesome. And as I looked across, I saw a sign that said opening soon, April crossed off. They wrote May. And then change is coming. We're optimistic. And I think we have a new sort of spring upon us. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I want to thank everyone. So optimistic and enjoy the weekend.
Well, and on that note, thank you all for joining us. And please share your feedback with us at communications@architects.org. You can also continue these conversations at BSA Connect, which is a LinkedIn forum where you can pose questions, share, and find community outside the knowledge communities and other BSA programming. And of course, you can find that by searching BSA Connect on LinkedIn. And you can stay up to date on the latest information at architects.org, through our Facebook, Twitter pages, and of course by signing up for our weekly e-newsletter Currents. And before I go, I want to take a moment to publicly thank my colleagues on staff. And like you, we are in a new world of operating and trying to figure out these new systems and still provide all the resources and programs for you. And finally, please join me in thanking Natasha Espada AIA, Ted Talukian AIA, Jay Wickersham FAIA, and Susan Green for joining us today. We know that all of your lives have been turned upside down, just like ours, and truly appreciate your willingness to take the time and share your knowledge. Thank you for what you do and for doing it so well. And to follow up on Jay and Ted's comments, a reminder to everyone, be safe, be healthy, and be kind, and have some fun out there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.